"Your hands in the air, boy!" The command echoes through the quiet night. Jamal Carter, just 17, stops in his tracks. The flashing red and blue lights paint his dark skin in shifting colors. He lifts his hands, confusion tightening his chest. Jamal was just walking home. The only thing is, fitting a description. Officer Karen Mitchell grips her holster, her eyes scanning him with suspicion. To her, he's not just a teenager, he's a suspect. No questions, no second thought, just judgment. A quiet street, an empty sidewalk. A flashlight in his face, turning him from a boy into a target. Jamal doesn't resist, and he doesn't fight back. But this night won't end the way the officer expects. Because what she doesn't know is that she just arrested the son of a man more powerful than she could ever imagine. Before we dive deeper, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you believe everyone should be treated with respect, click on the subscribe button now. Like and share this video to others. Jamal Carter, 17 years old, a bright student with a promising future. No criminal record, no trouble. Just another teenager walking home. But none of that mattered when Officer Karen Mitchell saw him that night. Officer Karen Mitchell, mid-30s, standing by her patrol car, hand resting near her holster. A trained officer, but one whose biases shaped her decisions. A veteran on the force, Officer Mitchell believed she could read a situation at a glance. But sometimes, what we think we see is far from the truth. Shift to Robert Carter, a man in his late 50s, sharp-eyed, composed, a highly respected CIA agent who had dedicated his life to justice, the kind of man whose name carried weight in places Karen couldn't even begin to understand. But on this night, Robert Carter wasn't thinking about his title. He wasn't an agent. He was just a father about to get a call that would change everything. Studies show that black men are stopped by police at disproportionately higher rates than any other group. The assumptions, the profiling, the wrongful arrests. It's a pattern seen too many times, and tonight, Jamal was caught in it. He had no idea what was coming next. The night was quiet. A streetlight flickered in the distance, the only sound coming from Jamal's footsteps on the pavement. He had walked this way countless times before, never once thinking twice about it. But tonight was different. Tonight, someone was watching. The hum of an idling patrol car fills the air. Inside, Officer Karen Mitchell watches Jamal from behind the wheel, her fingers tapping against the steering wheel. She squints, eyes narrowing as she studies the teenager's every move. She doesn't know his name, she doesn't know where he's going, but in her mind, she already knows everything she needs to. The engine revs, headlights flood the sidewalk, and the sirens wail for a split second, enough to make Jamal stop in his tracks. The door swings open, and boots hit the pavement. Officer Karen, firm, commanding. "Hey, hands where I can see them." Jamal turns slowly, squinting against the blinding light. His hands instinctively move slightly upward, not raised in surrender, but just enough to show he's no threat. Jamal, calm, confused. "What's going on?" Officer Karen, walking closer, studying him. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Jamal frowns, glancing around. The question doesn't make sense. This is his neighborhood, his home. His entire life is just 2 blocks away. "I live here, officer, just heading home." But in her mind, that answer wasn't enough. Officer Karen, skeptical, hand resting on her holster. "Oh yeah? You sure you're not checking out houses? Looking for an easy target?" Jamal's jaw tightens. The weight of the moment settles in. He's seen this before. He's heard the stories. But now, he's the one standing in the spotlight. Judged before he even speaks. Jamal. "Huh? I told you, I live here." Karen doesn't move. Her eyes flicker with something. Doubt? No, a decision. And just like that, she's already made up her mind. "Officer Karen, turn around. Hands up." Jamal stiffens. His breathing slows. He knows better than to argue, but his frustration is written across his face. He raises his hands higher. No reason, just a feeling, and sometimes a feeling is all it takes. Karen steps forward, grabbing his wrist. The cold snap of handcuffs cuts through the silence, metal tightening against his skin. A deep breath, a slow exhale. Jamal doesn't resist, but the fight is still there. In his eyes, in his posture, in the way his shoulders tense against the injustice. Across the street, a few people have stopped to watch. A phone screen glows as someone begins recording. Karen ignores them, her grip firm as she shoves Jamal toward the squad car. The door opens, the inside dark and unwelcoming. Jamal ducks his head as she pushes him inside. The door slams. The world outside suddenly feels so far away. Jamal Carter had done nothing wrong. But tonight, that didn't matter. To Officer Mitchell, this was just another arrest, another suspect, another name in a report. The squad car pulls away, red and blue lights flashing in the reflection of nearby windows. Jamal stares straight ahead, his mind racing. What happens next? How does this end? What neither of them knew was that a phone call was about to change everything. Because Jamal Carter wasn't just another kid on the street. He was the son of a man who had the power to turn the entire situation upside down. The squad car pulled away, disappearing into the night. Inside, Jamal Carter sat motionless, hands cuffed, staring at the metal divider between him and the officer who had stolen his freedom without a second thought. His mind raced. His mother would be waiting for him at home. His father would be furious. Cut to Robert Carter's home. A sleek office, dimly lit. The faint sound of a clock ticking on the wall. A man in his late 50s sits at his desk, scanning classified documents. His face is sharp, unreadable, the kind of expression worn by men who have seen too much, who know too much. Then, his phone buzzes. He glances at the screen, expecting another routine call. But the number flashing is unfamiliar. A local precinct. His expression shifts as he answers. Robert Carter. Calm but firm. This is Robert Carter. A static pause. A tired voice clears its throat on the other end. Desk sergeant. Sir, we have your son here. Jamal Carter. He was arrested tonight. The papers in Robert's hands still. His grip tightens. A long silence fills the space. He takes a slow breath, his fingers drumming lightly against the desk. When he speaks, his voice is steady, but there's something beneath it, something cold, something sharp. Robert Carter, why? The sergeant hesitates, flipping through paperwork. He knows this isn't just any man on the phone. He can hear it in his voice. Desk sergeant. Uncertain. I don't have all the details, sir. You'll need to speak to the arresting officer. Robert exhales slowly, controlling the fury creeping into his chest. Jamal, younger, beaming beside him, a proud father, an innocent son. And now, this? His jaw tightens. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Robert Carter, put her on the phone. Now. Cut to the police station. Officer Karen Mitchell leans against the front desk, sipping stale coffee, scrolling through her phone. Just another night. Just another suspect. Until a young officer rushes up, phone in hand, face pale. Young officer? Officer Mitchell? You need to take this call. Now. Karen frowns, unimpressed, taking the phone. Officer Karen? This is Officer Mitchell. A silence. Then a voice cuts through, deep, controlled, unmistakable in authority. Robert Carter. This is CIA agent Robert Carter. You just arrested my son. Karen's blood runs cold. She swallows, her posture straightening instinctively. She blinks, unsure if she heard correctly. Officer Karen hesitates. Sir, your son was... Robert Carter, cutting her off. Voice like ice. Did you run his record? Karen stammers. She hadn't. She didn't think she needed to. The color drains from her face as realization settles in. Robert Carter. Of course you didn't, because you saw a black kid and assumed. You profiled my son, Officer Mitchell, and now you've made a mistake that's about to cost you everything. Karen's grip on the phone tightens. She looks around the room, suddenly feeling the weight of every decision she's made that night. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was supposed to be routine. But now she had just put handcuffs on the wrong person. In one phone call, everything changed. Officer Mitchell thought she had all the power. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. Precinct was silent. The usual late-night chatter, the low hum of voices from the holding cells, the clicking of keyboards. All of it faded when Robert Carter walked through the front doors. The camera panned to the entrance as Robert Carter stepped inside. His suit was crisp, his eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made even the most seasoned officers shift uncomfortably. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone demanded attention. With calm but firm determination, Robert approached the desk sergeant. "Where is my son?" he asked. The desk sergeant hesitated, then gestured toward the back. Robert didn't wait for permission. He moved past, his steps measured, precise, unshaken. The scene cut to the holding area, where Jamal sat on a bench, his hands resting on his lap, his expression unreadable. He looked up as his father entered. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged, but the weight of the moment was palpable. "We're leaving," Robert said, his voice low, controlled anger seeping through. Jamal nodded. He trusted his father. He knew that when Robert Carter walked into a room, things happened. The camera shifted to Officer Karen Mitchell, who stood near the front desk, her back rigid, her fingers curled into fists. She knew why he was here. She braced herself as Robert turned to face her. "You, come with me," Robert commanded. The walk to the interrogation room was tense. Karen didn't speak. She followed him, swallowing back the lump forming in her throat. The room was cold, sterile. A metal table and 2 chairs. Robert took a seat, setting down a folder. Karen hesitated before sitting across from him. "Tell me, Officer Mitchell," Robert said, leaning forward, his voice sharp. "Why did you arrest my son?" Karen shifted uncomfortably. Her mind scrambled for an answer that wouldn't sound as hollow as it felt. He was acting suspiciously. It was late and— "Stop," Robert cut her off, opening the folder. "You and I both know that's not true." Karen's eyes dropped to the folder. Inside, there were classified reports, statistical data, case studies, pages and pages of documented racial profiling cases. She swallowed hard. "You think this was an isolated incident? I've spent years uncovering this corruption. I've worked in intelligence long enough to recognize patterns, Officer Mitchell. And let me tell you something. You are one of them." Karen's breath caught. The weight of the words sank in. For the first time, she felt exposed, like the spotlight had turned on her. In that moment, Officer Karen Mitchell saw herself through different eyes. She wasn't just a cop doing her job. She was a part of a system, one that had operated on assumptions, fear, and bias. Her fingers twitched on the table. She wanted to deny it, to fight back. But the evidence was undeniable. The statistics, the faces, the names. All of them spoke louder than any defense she could come up with. "You didn't arrest Jamal because he was doing something wrong," Robert said, leaning back, his voice unwavering. "You arrested him because he was there. Because you looked at him and decided his presence alone was a crime." Karen's jaw tightened. Her world tilted slightly, the ground beneath her no longer as solid as she thought. This wasn't just about one bad judgment call. This was bigger than her. And for the first time, she saw it. There was no justification, no excuse, only the reality that she had made a choice that would cost her more than she ever expected. A tense silence lingered in the air. "You made a mistake, Officer Mitchell," Robert said, his final words cold and absolute, "and now the whole world is going to see it." Karen exhaled shakily. The realization sank in. She wasn't just answering to a father. She was answering to the truth. The walls of the police station had crumbled under the weight of the truth, but the real battle was just beginning. This wasn't just about Jamal Carter anymore. It was about justice, accountability, and a system that had operated unchecked for too long. The scene shifts to a bustling courthouse filled with reporters, activists, and legal experts. The case had captured national attention, with protesters outside holding signs like "Justice for Jamal" and "End racial profiling now." Inside, Jamal sat at the plaintiff's table, his father, Robert Carter, standing strong beside him. This wasn't just a case. It was a message. Jamal Carter versus the city's police department, a lawsuit that would shake the foundation of biased policing. And across the room, seated at the defense table, was Officer Karen Mitchell. Karen sat stiffly, her badge now gone, replaced by a stack of legal documents. The weight of every eye in the courtroom was on her. She was no longer in control. Jamal's lawsuit begins. The judge entered, and the courtroom rose. The gavel struck once. "Order in the court. We are here today in the matter of Jamal Carter versus the City Police Department. The plaintiff alleges unlawful arrest, violation of civil rights, and racial profiling. The defense asserts the arrest was lawful. Karen's lawyer stood, but the prosecutor quickly cut in. Reasonable suspicion? Based on what? His skin color? The fact that he was walking home? Officer Mitchell never once stated an actual crime. The jury murmured. The prosecutor's words hit hard. Karen glanced at the jury, realizing her justification was falling apart. The evidence. A large screen lit up, showing surveillance footage of Jamal walking peacefully and Officer Mitchell's aggressive body cam footage. The prosecutor wasn't done. I'd like to submit evidence from internal affairs. Previous complaints against Officer Mitchell for racial bias. This is a pattern. Gasps filled the courtroom. Karen stiffened. It was all out in the open now. Robert Carter took the stand, his voice steady. Robert Carter, my son was lucky. He has a father with influence. But what about the kids who don't? How many times has this happened to someone without a voice? The prosecutor nodded. And that is exactly why we are here today. Karen faces the consequences. The jury foreman stood, and the verdict was delivered. We, the jury, find the defendant, Officer Karen Mitchell, guilty of wrongful arrest, racial profiling, and misconduct. A shift in the air. Karen's career was over. Officer Mitchell, you are hereby terminated and barred from future law enforcement roles. The department will pay a settlement to Jamal Carter. Karen closed her eyes, the weight of it all sinking in. Her badge was gone. Everything was gone. Outside the courthouse, Robert and Jamal took the podium. Robert Carter. This case was never just about Jamal. It was about a system that needed to be challenged. Jamal stepped forward. Jamal, I shouldn't have needed a father with power to get justice. This happens every day. We need real change. The crowd erupted in applause. The scene shifted to Karen Mitchell, exiting through a side door. No badge, no words. She disappeared into the city, facing the consequences of her choices. Justice wasn't just served today, it was exposed. The world saw the truth, and the truth can't be ignored. The courtroom battle is over, but its impact continues. Jamal Carter, once a victim, now speaks out as an activist against racial profiling and police reform, inspiring national change. Meanwhile, Karen Mitchell faces the consequences of her actions, losing her job and reputation. A panel discusses how the system enables racial bias, and people demand answers. On the courthouse steps, Jamal declares that while time doesn't change a system, people do. His fight for justice is just beginning, as the real change starts now. What would you have done in this situation? Have you or someone you know ever experienced racial profiling? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. This isn't just one story, it's a reality faced by many. Change begins with awareness, and awareness starts with us. If you believe in justice, share this video, start a conversation, and stand up for what's right. Real change starts with you. Like, subscribe, and be part of the movement for justice.